Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Then, another group of people walked in, pushing Ruka toward the back that she bumped into Ren. There was a man beside them reeking of smoke that made her turn around and hug his waist while nestling her face into his chest. While she inhaled his cool and exquisite scent, she greedily buried her face into his chest further. He had one hand on the back of her head in case people bumped into her. Finally, they reached the 8th floor, exited the elevator, and walked to the cinema entrance. Many young people were there waiting around. Nevertheless, once Ruka and Ren appeared, the young people's attention was on them. They were an eye-catching couple. Even though he wore a mask, people still envied Ruka because of his fantastic body, which stood out from the rest. Moreover, his elegant posture made people wonder about the handsome face hidden under the mask. The movie was about to start. So, she collected the tickets and went to the hall with him. She also bought a bottle of water for him and lemonade for herself. As they entered the hall, she efficiently found their seat, and they sat in the couple's seats, providing a good space for privacy. As the lights in the cinema dimmed, it allowed many couples to be more intimate. It would not be a problem to hold hands and hug. At first, Ruka was a little reserved. Still, she carefully scooted over toward him when he suggestively tugged on her. Finally, he stretched his arm and pressed her into his embrace. Ruka felt her heart pounding against her chest as she stayed beside him and looked at the screen. At that moment, a fiery scene between the male and female leads was playing on the screen. There was a huge bed on the screen, and the male and female leads were in a passionate tangle. Ruka's face turned beet red, and she hid in Ren's chest while covering her face. His hands that were on her waist tightened for some unknown reason. Eventually, the scene passed, and the plot returned to normal. Ruka sat upright as the starry sky attracted her. Then, a scary scene flashed on the screen as she picked up her drink to take a sip. As a result, her heart trembled with fear, and her hands touched something she should not have in her panic. The man's reaction made her heart skip a beat. She gasped as he looked down and locked eyes with her. The desire in his eyes was so evident in the dark that she gulped due to nervousness. "I wasn't doing it on purpose," she whispered. He grabbed her hand and hoarsely instructed, "Focus on the movie." She turned her attention to the front with her red face. The movie was her favorite science fiction genre, but that was the last thing on her mind now. Instead, she found herself unable to focus on the film at all. At that moment, she noticed her phone buzzing and flashing in her bag. It seemed like someone was calling her. She sat up from Ren's embrace and took her phone out to find Elijah's call. As she pressed the answer button, Elijah's anxious voice came through. "Miss Singed, is Sir with you?" "He's with me." "Where are you both?" "We're watching a movie." "What? Are you guys at the cinema?" "Miss Singed, please ask Mr. Hassan to return immediately. If not, we'll have to come personally and pick him up." A surprised Ruka questioned, "Is he in danger?" "We've lost contact with him for 3 hours. Please ask him to return. If not, we will initiate first-level security." "That will cause huge problems and confusion," Elijah said grimly. She was utterly stupefied as she thought to herself. Is the situation that bad? Okay. I'll get him home now. She could only promise Elijah and cut the date short. "Send us your location as well. I'll send someone over. His safety cannot be compromised, Miss Singed. So please cooperate with us." "All right. I know," Ruka answered and then sent their location to him. But, to be honest, she was still in a daze. So, the man beside her had escaped Elijah's eyes to come to her. Affected by Elijah's anxiety, she was wholly concerned about his safety as she immediately pulled on Ren's sleeve and whispered into his ear, Elijah's been looking for you. Let's go back. His brows furrowed tightly. What did he say? He said they'll initiate first-level security measures if you're not back. Ron, let's go. I'm begging you. We have to go back. Ruka got more fearful the more she thought about it. How could she let this man accompany her to a movie alone? If anything happened to him, she was to blame. Please, I'm begging you. Let's go back. Ruka was so worried that she started to beg softly in his ear. He caved to her plea and took her hand while getting up, and they left the cinema before the movie ended. Ruka nervously held on to him as they walked to the elevator. Whenever people squeezed into the elevator, her heart beat faster, and she would look at them, fearing they would pose a danger to him. Rin sensed that she was panic-stricken out of concern for him, so he wrapped his arms around her. Remorse flashed across his face as he comforted her. Nothing's going to happen. Don't worry. As soon as they left the elevator, Ruka grabbed his hand and dashed toward the mall's entrance. When they exited the mall, she was shocked to see flashing lights from a big group of Special Forces convoy. Elijah came out from behind with a few people trailing him. Mr. Hassan, please return to the White House. If we still can't find you, I'd have to contact Mr. President and notify your parents. Ruka was obviously frightened by the scene before her. Ren narrowed his eyes and coldly demanded, "Stop talking." Then, he led Ruka to a car. After that, the cars gradually left the place. On both sides of the motorcade were heavily armored Humvees that led the way. While Ruka sat in the car, she still felt cold sweat dripping down her spine. At this moment, she finally understood how important this man was. On the other hand, the man who snuck out behind his secretary's back took off his mask while looking frustrated and displeased. Nonetheless, Ruka was very touched that he took 2 hours of his precious time to spend with her, not to mention the fact that he compromised his safety while doing so. It's okay. Don't be angry. Elijah was only concerned for your safety, she gently advised him while hugging his arm. Ruka thought of talking to Rin since she was worried Elijah would be reprimanded when they got out of the car. Ruka, if we can no longer go shopping, eat out, or watch movies together as normal people do, are you still willing to date me? Ron asked hoarsely, and his dark eyes were fixated on her intently. She paused as she remembered the excuse she had used for rejecting him. He couldn't go shopping, enjoy meals outside, or watch movies with her. So, he ignored his safety so that he could do all these things with her? She felt guilty, worried, and most of all, highly emotional about it since he had risked his life in order to be with her. Wait, what did he say? Whether or not she was willing to date him if he could no longer do those things with her? Did he want to date her? Ruka pursed her lips. If you want us to date, please look out for your safety. Don't worry Elijah the way you did today. You seem to care a lot about what Elijah thinks. Do you fancy him? Run felt jealous of Elijah, and she had brought him up way too many times today. She had wanted to praise Elijah for being so competent in his work, but now she felt like she was just making everything worse for him. Thus, she shook her head quickly. Of course not. Please don't misread everything. I just don't want you to reprimand him. Why are you so worried about him? Ron asked, feeling more and more jealous by the second. Well, he worked hard to ensure your safety today. He's been accommodating and responsible. Yet, Ruka felt that she was making everything worse with her reasoning. Suddenly, she realized that Ren's face had become closer to hers. She was already sitting up against him, so now they were nearly face to face. She didn't have a good feeling about the whole thing and was about to retreat, but he had already anticipated this. He placed a hand on the back of her head to prevent her from moving away and then tugged her face towards his. He kissed her aggressively as if he was punishing her for repeatedly defending a man that wasn't him. Her lashes fluttered against his cheeks as she panicked. They were in a moving car flanked by escort motorcycles. Couldn't he be more tactful? Ruka's worries were unfounded since they had heavily tinted the car windows to protect the passengers' privacy, so they were safe from prying eyes. Nevertheless, she could still see their surroundings from inside the car. This made her nerves prickle with anxiety, and she tried pushing him away. But, alas, he continued kissing her so hard she felt herself beginning to sweat with how hot and bothered it was making her. Oh God, she must be going crazy. He had been the one determined to keep their relationship under wraps, yet here he was, kissing her recklessly. Not to mention, his bodyguard was still in the driver's seat. Ruka pushed against him harder, and eventually, Ren took pity on her and released her. He leaned his forehead against hers, and his hot pants brushed against her face. Do not fancy anyone other than me. She was still dazed from the kiss and responded affectionately, okay. When he heard her immediate agreement, he smiled in satisfaction and glanced at his watch. I've spoiled your birthday celebration. I'll make it up to you. It was the first time she had experienced such a grand exit, and she couldn't help but feel respect for the man. His societal position was such that they probably wouldn't have met if she hadn't grown up in the Hassan family. She glanced at the girls looking around by the street and knew that in a different life, she would be as distant to him as they were now. Ruka became unhappy at that thought. Life was so strange sometimes. A large hand then rested against her cheek. She looked up at Run, eyes damp with tears. What's wrong? Surprised by her sudden change in mood, Run cupped her face with his hands tenderly. She shook her head in response because she couldn't share her thoughts with him. Besides, she didn't know why she had gotten so miserable either. I'm fine, Ruka answered quietly. She wondered if Ren's feelings for her were just a figment of her imagination and would disappear sooner or later. At this point, she suddenly understood why he was so crazy about her. If he had to leave her for any reason, she would never fall for someone else ever again. Besides, no other man would ever steal her heart the way he had. Immediately, she grabbed his hand tightly, scared that everything was just a dream. Ren felt confused by this because he could sense her sadness, yet he didn't know why she felt that way. Did he do anything wrong? In the end, he could only pull her into a hug, allowing her to lean against him and rest. After they arrived back at his house, he got out of the car first. Then, he used one hand to protect her head when she followed behind, an instinctive reaction born out of his love for her. Soon, Elijah approached him and whispered, Mr. Hassan, everything is ready. Ren nodded. Thank you for your hard work. We'll leave everything here then, Mr. Hassan, Elijah answered before getting into the car and leaving. After the entourage was gone, Ren and Ruka were left alone in the large garden. He held her hand and led her toward the hall. She could feel his love for her as she followed him, her mouth unconsciously curling into a smile. As soon as they arrived in the doorway leading to the hall, she was stunned by the scene before her. They decorated it in a fresh yet romantic theme for a birthday party. Presents were laid out amongst the flowers and balloons, with a flower arrangement right by the wine, champagne, and dessert dishes on the table. Right in the center of that table was an unopened cake box. Her love for him surged as she took in everything, and she immediately turned to give him a tight hug. Thank you. Ron wrapped his arms around her waist and smiled, enjoying her voluntary act of intimacy. As for Ruka, she felt really touched because he had done so much for her. Do you want to eat the cake or unwrap the presents first? He asked her lovingly. She shook her head as she continued hugging him. For now, let me hug you for a bit. He leaned down and pressed a kiss into her hair. He had assigned Elijah to set up everything back home in the afternoon with plans of surprising her after their date, but he hadn't expected it to be interrupted. Thank God this surprise had successfully made up for it. Ren teasingly blew into her ear. What? Are you planning to unwrap me like your presents? Ruka blushed furiously and let him go. She didn't have the courage for that. I wouldn't dare. I dare you to. The man smiled at her, eyes half closed. She couldn't help placing her hands on his shoulders and getting on her tiptoes to press a kiss into his dimples. It had been something she had always wanted to do. The kiss made his smile wider, dimples becoming more pronounced. She smiled in satisfaction at this and retreated. I think we'll have the cake first. Let's blow the candles and make a wish. Sure. Ren nodded and walked toward the table as she opened the cake box. The cake was about 6 inches in diameter, just enough for the two of them. She immediately fell in love with the heart-shaped cake, pulling out her phone to take pictures before putting in the card saying Happy 24th. And lighting the candles. He moved beside Ruka to switch off the overhead light, leaving the wall lamps to create a romantic and intimate atmosphere. Her heart sped up as he approached her, placing her hand in his. Let's make a wish and blow the candles together. He shook his head and declined her offer. It's your birthday. She obeyed, breathing in deeply as she fluttered her eyes shut. Then, finally, she pressed her palms together and made a wish. Ruka didn't hesitate to make her wish because she only wanted one thing, to be with him. She blushed and looked toward Ren when she was done, and he immediately knew what she had wished for. It seemed that he didn't need to worry about her reciprocating his feelings because it was already mutual. She bent down to blow out the candles while he lit some scented candles and placed them off to one side. The flickering flames made the atmosphere seem more intimate as she took a knife, cut the first slice of cake, and served it to him on a plate. Here, you can eat it first. He accepted the plate and sat beside her as he ate. She cut herself another slice thoughtfully, then said, We didn't make Elijah stay for some cake. Rin stopped eating and said irritatedly, You seem to think an awful lot about him. Ruka hunched her shoulders. He's so good at being jealous, huh? I talked about his assistant twice, and now he's resentful? I think there's too much cake, and it will be a waste if we don't finish it, she explained weakly. Fine, just waste it then, he replied darkly. Only one man should be here with Ruka celebrating her birthday, and that man was him. She blinked once, knowing she couldn't continue angering him. Therefore, she slowly enjoyed the cake bit by bit, feeling happy as she tasted the sweet cream. However, she had gotten some of it on one corner of her mouth, and when she turned to Rin, his gaze became darker at the sight. She realized it immediately and licked it off, making his breath catch. Didn't she know how dangerous that act was? He stretched out a hand and held Ruka's head in place as he leaned toward her. He did not give her any time to react before kissing her. It was punishing, and he felt himself drown in the sweetness of her mouth, which mingled with the taste of the cream, and he only released her when he felt her smear some cream on his face. Ruka was dazed from the kiss, but then burst out laughing when she saw the cream on his face. When the man wiped cream on her face in retaliation, she widened her eyes challengingly and swept some cream off the cake. She was about to reciprocate when he caught her wrist and sucked the cream off her fingers. She felt her heart flutter at the action. How could he? Ren smiled and praised, It's so sweet. She thought she might become insane from this. She had been playing around, yet now she was utterly out of her depth. She withdrew her hand immediately, still feeling the fading heat of her tongue on her fingers. He realized that he must have scared her and said immediately, All right, that's enough. Go have a bath so you can open the presents. She handed him a tissue. You too. Okay. He nodded. You can go first. As Ruka couldn't eat any longer, she rose to her feet and went for a bath upstairs. If she didn't leave, her heart might leap out of her chest. Yet, despite that, she was so happy she felt like flying, unable to think of anything else except him and his overflowing affection for her. When she had finished with her bath, she went downstairs. She wore a long white dress and a cardigan, and she looked as beautiful as a fae with her loose hair and pale skin. Since Ren wasn't in the living room, she settled on the couch and picked up one bouquet to smell the light fragrance. It smelt very much like love and happiness. Ruka looked at the presents on the table, not knowing where to even begin. When she heard the sound of footsteps from the stairs, she looked up and saw Ren in casual clothing, a dark sweater and beige pants. The clothes made him look softer, yet he retained his usual steely demeanor. She waited for him to sit beside her before sighing. "Why did you prepare so many presents? I only need one from you." He reached for one and handed it to her. "Open it and see." She couldn't help being attracted by the pastel blue wrapping. It was her favorite color. He must have taken her preferences to heart. Then, when she finally unwrapped the gift, she found a pretty pastel blue beaded handbag. Even though there weren't any brand logos on it, it was evident from the beautiful craftsmanship that it was handmade. "It's gorgeous. I love it." She held it out to admire it under the light. Ron took a ring box from his pocket and gave it to her. "Open this one." Ruka's breath caught. "Is he giving me a ring?" He placed it in her palm, and she bit her lip as she opened it. A shiny open diamond ring with a simple, elegant design lay inside, which looked vintage yet stylish. Before she could react, he took it and placed it on her right middle finger. It was a perfect fit, making her blink in surprise. How did he know the size of her finger? Just then, he pulled out another ring from his pocket and wore it on his left middle finger. Although the rings differed in size, their similarity made it known that it was clearly a couple's ring. These were matching rings for couples. At that realization, she blushed harder, and she couldn't believe they were at that stage already. "Did you choose them?" Ruka asked shyly. "Yes." Ren nodded. It had been the most important gift to him, a promise to tie them together so no one could ever separate them again. "Do not remove it without my permission," he continued in a low voice. She nodded obediently. "Okay." The other presents were some necessities she might need, but she had already received the most important gift, which was his heart. It was soon 11:30 p.m., and she concealed a yawn. She had experienced a shock today, and it had worn her out.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.